Hello and welcome to Bike Wale, and today we're going to talk about the new TVS Ronin, a brand new motorcycle. It's been launched in three versions. It starts at 1.49 lakhs and it goes up to 1.71. The base two versions, they get disc brakes at both the front and the rear wheels, but single channel ABS. And the top spec one, the 1.71 lakh version, gets dual channel ABS. Now, TVS says that the Ronin is a brand new genre of motorcycle that's coming. Maybe for TVS it is, but otherwise it's just another neo-retro motorcycle. Something like the Triumph Bonnies we've seen, and even the Royal Enfield Classic, the upcoming Royal Enfield Hunter 350, and if you're feeling generous, maybe even the Yamaha FZX. Now, the Ronin sits between the Apache 204V and the RR310 in TVS's lineup. And there's so much that TVS is saying about this bike, and it's using so many adjectives to make it sound like this is an outstanding product, something that nobody's thought about it. But is it really? And what do you get with this motorcycle? And finally, is it really something that you should consider? Well, that's exactly what we're going to answer in the course of this video. Now, generally, TVS hits the nail on the head when it comes to design, the various Apaches being case in point. The Ronin 2 is a good-looking motorcycle, but it's not revolutionary in terms of design, and it looks more generic from a few angles, but the stance and proportions are pretty agreeable. The design itself is simple: a straightforward, old-looking tank, a boxy side panel, and just a fender for a tailpiece. And as with bikes of yore, there's enough exposed chassis all around, all of which again is of the old school tubular variety. It also runs a slightly bulbous bash plate to complete its go anywhere intentions. The departure from tradition comes in the form of gold upside down forks and the offset digital instrumentation. But the offset design for the instrumentation again harps back to the scramblers of yore. Now, before we go further, let's listen to what the Ronin sounds like. The Ronin will be powered by a 225.9cc engine. It's a single-cylinder engine. It's going to be air and oil cooled. Now, this engine is based on the Apache 204V engine, so this one too runs a 4-valve layout. And even in terms of output figures, power and torque, the difference between the two engines is not much. So the Ronin makes a little over 20 horsepower. The Apache also makes a little over 20 horsepower. In terms of torque, the Ronin makes just about 20 Newton meters, while the Apache is a little over 70 Newton meters. So there's a little difference there, but that doesn't really tell you the whole story, because to get this additional capacity, TVS has increased the stroke of the engine, and the moment you do that, you're enabling the engine or changing its characteristic to develop more torque and lower down the rev, and it should give you a flatter torque curve. So that's the basic difference, which I think these horsepower figures don't tell you, but that's what it's going to be. And so what's happened now with the Ronin is that now it runs a 66 bore and stroke. And what this does is then makes it a perfect square engine. Now with the Apache, we've seen it's an over square engine. Over square engine meaning it's got a bigger bore or compared to a stroke which is shorter. And then that makes for an engine that's quicker revving, easier revving, but it also makes its power and torque higher up in the rev range, while under square or a perfectly square engine is lazier in that sense, but it develops its torque and power lower down, so that gives you better tractability and better rideability in that sense. So if you look at beyond just the power figures, and if you look at the RPM at which these power and torque figures are developed, you'll find the difference. The Apache, 20 bhp, a little over 20 bhp, but at 9,000 RPM. As for the Ronin, a little over 20 bhp, but a little over 7,000 RPM. Similarly for the torque, a little over 17 Newton meters for the Apache, but it's made at over 7,000 RPM, while the Ronin's near 20 Newton meters of torque is made a little over 3,000 RPM. So that's where the difference is. So when you ride these bikes in the real world, the Apache is clearly going to be the more energetic, more enthusiast-centric motorcycle, which will rev easily, it'll feel faster, it'll feel more fun to ride in that sense, while the Ronin will be the lazier of the two motorcycles and would be more for laid-back riders than riders who are looking for more excitement from their motorcycle. Having said that, the Ronin has a claimed top speed of 120 kilometers per hour, so we expect that 100 kilometer per hour cruising speed should be good on the Ronin as well. In terms of cycle parts, Ronin doesn't use conventional parts that you'd expect for a neo-retro motorcycle. So you've got upside down forks at the front, you've got a monoshock at the back. Now upside down forks isn't something that you see in old school kind of motorcycles, but it's there and in gold, so it clearly stands out. This should clearly give it better handling ability than if it were to use, say, regular thin telescopic forks up front and twin shocks at the back. So clearly there is focus on dynamic ability for the Ronin as well. And then when you look at the wheels and the tires, it runs 17-17 instead of 19-17, which would be the general idea behind or the general route that most OEMs or motorcycle manufacturers take when it comes to making neo-retro scramblers. So focus on road is very clear, even though communication-wise TVS is saying that you can take this motorcycle anywhere. And that kind of communication is slightly reflected in the tires, in the tread pattern. It's got a blocky tread pattern, but again, Remora tires, we've tested Remoras in the past, extremely good tires. And here again, this would certainly, they look like they are off-road biased, but no, they will be focused, or they are focused for road use more than off-road. And when you look at the brakes, you've got a larger disc at the front, a smaller disc at the back, and discs are standard on all versions, all three versions of the motorcycle, like we said at the start, but it's only in the top spec that you will get dual channel ABS, otherwise you'll just have a single channel ABS there. Now, if you look at the seating ergos of the motorcycle, the focus again is on comfort here rather than handling or involved riding. So you can see the handlebars are wide, they are relatively tall, the seat is flat, and your foot pegs are more neutrally positioned than being slightly rear set, what you'd expect in a slightly sportier motorcycle. So, and that is how we've seen most neo retro motorcycles in the country, that the focus is on comfort, more straight up seating, more commute centric seating rather than aggressive riding. Another big talking point for the Ronin, apart from the accessories and the riding apparel that will be offered as part of the whole Ronin owning and riding experience, are its features. It gets two ABS modes, rain and urban, which alter the intrusiveness and response of the ABS. It also gets all LED lighting and a digital instrumentation, like we said, with connected tech. The connected tech includes smartphone connectivity with call and SMS alerts, voice commands, turn-by-turn navigation, estimated time of arrival, engine temperature, battery voltage, and even a record of the top speed that you might have achieved. Now, if you're in the market for Ronin and you're wondering what the competition looks like, well, for a few 10,000s here and there, you've got the likes of the Java 42, you've got the classic 350 Royal Enfield, and like we said at the start, there's also the Yamaha FZX that you can consider. But these aren't the real challenges, or these are not the bikes that Ronin really needs to worry about. The bike that Ronin needs to worry about is the new Royal Enfield Hunter 350, which will be launched next month. Now, when that bike comes out, its philosophy is almost identical to what the Ronin is conveying. So you've got a motorcycle that will have a low seat height, you've got a motorcycle that will have sitting up ergos like the Ronin. The only real difference here is that Ronin's got slightly neutrally positioned foot pegs, while the Hunter 350 will have slightly rear set, so a little more engaging riding position is what the Hunter 350 is going to offer. But otherwise, in terms of specs, you can see that both will run, or even the Hunter will run 17-inch wheels front and rear, just like the Ronin does, but with road-focused tires than an off-road on-off balance that the Ronin has. More than that, a larger capacity engine, of course, 350cc, and with that, higher weight compared to the Ronin. So that's where the difference might be, and this difference will translate into when it comes to handling, when it comes to braking, when it comes to fuel efficiency. We feel the Ronin will definitely have an advantage, but where the Hunter will clearly score over the Ronin is when it comes to the output figures. The horsepower figures are almost the same, but it's the torque. The Hunter is going to produce 28 Newton meters of torque, and that would probably make a big difference because it would produce this torque around the same RPM, around 4,000 RPM. So there is going to be a lot of rideability, tractability that the Hunter is going to come in with, and pricing would be very similar to what the Ronin is. So at the end, it will come down to whether you want to invest in a brand that is well known, that has been playing in this field, which is Royal Enfield, or a new brand in this space, but otherwise a very well-known brand, established in terms of quality, in terms of features, in terms of tech, which the Royal Enfield is not known for. So, but that we'll know closer to the Hunter's launch in August. But that's where we feel that the Ronin is going to have, or it'll face its fiercest competition from when the Hunter is launched. Another big difference I think between the two would be that the Hunter will not be able to deliver the same sort of fancy tech that we're seeing in the Ronin. So that's another distinguishing factor or the difference between the two bikes. But it would be interesting to see when the Hunter comes out and what sort of pricing it looks at. So this was the Ronin for you. A brand new motorcycle, a brand new segment for TVS, not a brand new segment per se. And a lot is riding for TVS on this front because they're moving into a space that they've never gone into this space on its own. I mean, of course, there's the RR 310, but that's a BMW collab. But on their own, they've never gone this high, so I think there's a lot of riding here and there's going to be a lot of focus here. And there are going to be apparels, there are going to be riding gear and riding outings that they're going to plan with the Ronin. So they're going to build a whole community with the Ronin, and it'll be interesting to see how that works out. And that was the Ronin for you. Thank you so much for watching.